Electra, the daughter's complex, and the mirror of paternal desire. When the name Elektra is mentioned outside classical mythology circles, it rarely evokes Agamemnon's daughter in her tragic and ritual dimension. More often, the term refers to a psychoanalytic construct popularized in the 20th century, the so-called Elektra complex. Although frequently misunderstood, oversimplified, or even trivialized, this concept, originating in Sigmund Freud's Reflections, touches one of the most sensitive cores of feminine psychic development, the girl's primal relationship with her father, and how this bond structures her desire, identity, and search for partners throughout life. Unlike the Jungian reading, which sees Elektra as a collective archetype of loyalty and memory, the Freudian perspective places her at the heart of the inverted Oedipal drama, a deeply formative, intimate, and sexualized conflict in which the father becomes the first model of love, and the mother, temporarily, the rival. The birth of the complex, Freud, and the inversion of Oedipus. Freud, while developing his theory of the Oedipus complex, in which the boy desires the mother and sees the father as a rival, recognized the need to propose an equivalent for the girl's psychosexual development. Although he never extensively used the term Elektra complex in his writings, it was Carl Jung who coined the phrase, and Freud rejected it as imprecise. The underlying idea appears in texts such as The Infantile Genital Organization, 1923, and Femininity, 1933. For Freud, upon discovering the anatomical difference between the sexes, the girl experiences what he called the castration shock. Faced with the absence of a penis, she interprets her body as deficient, blames the mother for having given birth to her incomplete, and transfers her libidinal investment to the father, seeing in him not only a protector, but the bearer of what she lacks, the symbolic phallus, representing power, wholeness, and desire. In this movement, the father ceases to be merely an authority figure and becomes the primary object of infantile desire. The girl begins to seek, consciously or unconsciously, his attention, affection, and approval as compensation for an imagined loss. This desire is not necessarily genital or explicit. It operates on a symbolic and emotional level, shaping how the girl will relate to the masculine world from then on. The Elektra complex, in this view, is less about vengeance or posthumous loyalty and more about idealization, identification, and projection. The father becomes the prototype of the desirable man, and all future men will be compared to him, consciously or unconsciously. The idealization of the father as the model of love. This paternal idealization is the core of Freud's symbolic interpretation of Elektra. The father represents the girl's first encounter with masculine otherness, but also with law, protection, strength, and often the tenderness she associates with the masculine figure. When this relationship is healthy, that is, when the father responds with affection, presence, and clear boundaries, the girl internalizes a positive image of the masculine, which can foster balanced romantic relationships in adulthood. However, when the bond is distorted, whether by absence, coldness, authoritarianism, or, in extreme cases, abuse, idealization can become pathological. The adult woman begins to seek men who unconsciously replicate that dynamic. Inaccessible, authoritarian, emotionally distant men, or paradoxically, excessively protective ones, as if trying to correct through repetition what failed in childhood. It is at this point that the myth of Elektra gains new resonance in the Freudian reading. Although in Greek tragedy, she does not harbor an explicit sexual desire for her father, her extreme devotion, her refusal to accept any substitute, and her fixation on Agamemnon's figure even after his death can all be read as a metaphor for the psychic attachment Freud described. Electra does not merely seek to avenge a murdered king. She seeks to restore the only man who, in her psyche, can never be replaced. Her struggle is not so much against the mother, but against the possibility that another man might occupy the father's symbolic place. In this sense, Clytemnestra is not only a murderer, she is the figure who introduces the betrayal of the ideal, allowing another man, Aegisthus, to assume the throne, the marital bed, and symbolically, the father's place. For Electra, this is unacceptable, not out of political loyalty, but out of fidelity to the primal model of desire. The mother's role, rival, or reflection. In the Freudian view, the mother occupies an ambivalent position in the Electra complex. Initially loved, she becomes, after the discovery of sexual difference, responsible for the girl's lack. The anger directed toward the mother is not moral, but existential. She is the one who gave the daughter a castrated body, who deprived her of the phallus. This hostility, however, is not permanent, as the girl internalizes feminine identity, often through identification with the mother, especially when she realizes she can only win the father's love by becoming like the woman he chose. The conflict resolves. The girl abandons her incestuous desire for the father, assumes her femininity, and redirects her desire toward other men. But what happens when this process fails? When the girl cannot overcome her attachment to the father? In such cases, the Electra complex remains active in adult life, manifesting as an incessant search for men who replicate paternal traits, whether voice, gaze, posture, intelligence, or even flaws. The woman may become involved with older, authoritarian, emotionally unavailable men, or those with a strong aura of protection, not by chance, but by unconscious compulsion. She is not choosing a partner, she is reenacting an unresolved childhood drama. And often, these relationships repeat the original pattern of frustration. The idealized man is always absent, distant, or incapable of offering the full love the girl once dreamed of receiving from her father. Electra in contemporary life, between myth and the unconscious. Today, in an age of absent fathers, early divorces, social media, and fleeting relationships, the Electra complex resurfaces in new forms. Many women report being attracted to men who resemble their fathers, not necessarily physically, but in attitudes, values, or even ways of failing. Others, conversely, radically reject any resemblance to the paternal figure as a defense against repeating trauma. Both reactions are facets of the same phenomenon, the persistence of the father as the symbolic reference of the masculine. It is crucial to understand that the Electra complex, in the Freudian view, is not a pathology in itself, but a normal stage of feminine psychosexual development. It becomes pathological only when the girl, or the adult woman, cannot transcend this phase, remaining trapped in an unresolved dynamic of desire. Healing, in this context, does not come from vengeance or memory, as in the tragic reading, but from symbolic elaboration, recognizing that the father was the first love, but not the only possible one, that the paternal ideal was a childhood construction, not an absolute truth, and that adult desire can be free, creative, and not merely repetitive. The symbolic superiority of the father and the search for validation. A frequently overlooked aspect in discussions of the Electra complex is how deeply it is intertwined with the search for masculine validation. In a culture still marked by patriarchal structures, the father's gaze is, for many girls, the first mirror in which they see themselves as worthy of love. His approval confers value, his rejection, invisibility. Thus, even independent, successful, and patriarchy-critical women may unconsciously carry the need to be chosen by a man who symbolically represents the paternal figure. This dynamic explains why so many intelligent women become involved with emotionally immature men, or why others avoid serious relationships altogether. The fear of not being enough for the ideal man, who is, in truth, a projection of the idealized father, paralyzes the capacity to love authentically. The path of integration, from infantile desire to adult freedom. Integrating the Electra complex, therefore, does not mean denying love for the father, but demystifying it. It means understanding that the infantile desire was legitimate, yet limited by a child's perspective. It means seeing the father not as a god, but as a fallible man, with his lights and shadows. And above all, it means assuming one's own authority over desire. The woman who overcomes the Electra complex is not the one who forgets her father, but the one who no longer needs him, nor his copy, to feel complete. In this sense, the true resolution of Electra's myth does not lie in Clytemnestra's death, but in the possibility that Electra, one day, might love a man for who he is, not for what he represents. Not as a substitute for the father, but as himself. This is the rite of passage Freud pointed to, however controversially, from fixation to freedom, from repetitive desire to creative love. Conclusion: Electra as a call to awareness. The Electra complex, in the Freudian view, is more than a developmental stage. It is an invitation to self-perception. It reminds us that our most intense loves are often not free choices, but echoes of primal bonds. Recognizing this does not diminish feeling, it liberates it. When a woman understands that her attraction to a certain type of man is linked to her history with her father, she gains power, the power to choose consciously, to love without compulsion, to build relationships that are not shadows of the past. Electra, therefore, is not only the daughter who awaits vengeance, she is also the girl who looks at her father and sees, for the first time, what love is. And she is the adult woman who one day must learn to look at herself and discover that the love she sought outside has always been, in potential, within her.